So I decided to make a video kind of about my thinking style for Onslaught because it seems to be a recurring event now that they've made some changes. So I'm going to go through some attack teams that I use and kind of my thinking style behind them. So this is kind of one of my typical attack teams, my melee attack team. And I use a lot of control weapon-wise, but I also have a decent amount of power. So Camilla has an impair on attack weapon, while Lily has a stun on attack weapon. Sean has a pure attack weapon because I gave him a bunch of vet rings. So the goal is to try and destroy the other team as fast as possible using basic attacks, and ideally no rushes, which is why I'm going with this attack weapon versus the other one that has a huge bonus to AP when attacking. Dale has a natural impair weapon, he also has a great active skill, and then James is my S-Class toon whose weapon is not perfect, so at some point I need to fix it. To be honest, I don't really need Camilla as a lead. I could use a more defensive lead that gives HP and attack, for instance, because I don't want my team to be rushing, but I do like that she can hold an impair weapon. I also find her active skill to be really useful, being a stun recovery. Lily has a great active skill of stun and 100% heal reduction, while Glenn can recover bleed. Sean has attack up and focus, and James has elusive and AP gain. I don't like Michelle's active skill as much because the AP gain isn't very useful because I don't want any toon to rush. With Yumiko, I run her sometimes because her confuse on attack by having the confounding ability. Her AP gain again isn't very useful, but it is an option there. So those specific melee teams are really effective against yellow leads like Michelle, Lydia, some yellow Andrea teams, as well as like blue Garrett or blue Carl. So some of the teams where you have a lot of blue and yellow toons because you'll have a type advantage and can do a high damage output. So now when we switch over to defense, it's a little different than having a war defense because you don't want to have toons that have impair on their weapons, because if you end up impairing the enemy, you're actually helping them because you want to tempt the enemy to rush you. So you could end up building a team that rushes early and causes the opponent to have to make a decision to rush you because it's very difficult to control multiple toons. So I had Cole first, 20% AP, I got it on his weapon, so I'm hoping that with his taunt active skill, as well as him rushing and being able to taunt the enemy, that'll help. Joshua, who can do attack down, your typical Eric lead, which beefs up my defense with HP and defense, can revive, 100% heal reduction and stun recovery. Joshua, I think it's taunt recovery that's on him. The next toon that I'm looking for, I'm going to go with Green Glenn because he's a command toon, so he can help me rush my team early. His confuse rush and attack up, as well as defense up, and his active skill recovering bleed can be really important because a lot of people can also use a bleed attack team in order to use a non-rushing attack team in order to get the point bonus. Now, a toon I'm also considering here is someone like Jessie, who can recover from bleed and stun and knows tenacity, so she won't die from just one attack. She'll be left with 20% of her HP, and she's a healer. So now I'm going to take a look here. I could use someone like Koa, who is not a super ideal toon because of the AP down weapon that I'd probably give him. So if someone has an absolute defense weapon, that would be better in my opinion. I don't want to run Magna because I would probably give her an impair weapon, or I would need a very heavily defensive weapon. As mentioned, I don't want to use an AP down weapon. I want to use a stun on attack weapon, for instance, because that way I can apply some control to the enemy, and that way they're not attacking my toon on purpose just to not gain AP. When looking about for my blue toons, again, this is just a defensive weapon, and I'm not looking to impair them because if I end up impairing my enemy, I'm actually kind of aiding them in making a no-rush team. And the whole point in Onslaught is to get your opponent to rush if you're on defense. I'm hoping that this team will have a little bit of firepower just because of the defense down when attacking weapon that I just gave to Eric. Now, I might end up switching that with Joshua just because Joshua knows hold the line, so he gets 25% more attack and defense as the other toons end up dying. Now, this is not the type of team that I would want to run only because Koa helps the enemy. I could end up putting in a toon like Alati here, or maybe Ivanova even, because I feel like a Guardian could be really useful, especially if you're able to bring the enemy down to just a toon or two, because you could end up just getting that Guardian Shield to go off again and again and just get in a loop where they can't actually attack you if it's 1v1. But the issue with Ivanova is that her rush impairs the enemy. Another thinking style for a defensive team is to go more slightly offensive, so the enemy has to make quick decisions in order to take you out. The unfortunate part is, as soon as someone becomes familiar with their team, if you run a heavy offensive team, so like Michelle is a very offensive toon, I would say Piper is also a pretty offensive toon, Nick is a commander, so he can get your toons to rush a bit faster and can cause chaos, as well as his attack stat is actually decently high, considering he is a command toon. I remember when he first came out, that was something that a lot of people noticed, including myself. So I'm looking for my Donnie lead to put at the start of this team. I'm going to add Decap Sandy here only because her special weapon does a double attack, so I have the opportunity to potentially kill the offensive team, depending on what they run, of course. And I could just end up dying, like as I showed you before, my offensive team does a lot of strong basic attacks and could take this type of team out. It's kind of about filling in the holes so that the opponent isn't able to use basic attacks as much. So you can apply reflect damage mods to your team on defense in anticipation of basic attacks being used. Donnie is a true defensive lead with HP and defense. When he rushes, he gains AP for the team, as well as heals and stuns. So I think he's a really great lead to have. And if you don't have him, try to ascend to get him. I feel like he's a great asset. Another toon that I'm going to kind of consider here is Mercer. I don't like him completely, only because he's more of a tank toon to have, where he just takes a number of hits to kill. But in Onslaught, you don't need a fast raiding team like War. You can take as many turns and as much time within reason as you like. So Mercer is not my favorite toon to use here on defense. I want to stick away from my Jesus on defense because he is an AP down weapon when being attacked. He doesn't have absolute defense. Charlie is a decent toon to use because he has great control with his taunt on attack. He hits pretty hard. He has a strong attack. His rush does line damage as well as bleed, and his active skill is 100% heal reduction. Rosita is an interesting toon here because I like her retribution skill, which gains AP for my team, but her weapon is AP down when attacking, which isn't ideal. For Nick, I'm giving him an absolute defense weapon for now, but I could also go with an AP weapon to the whole team with some defense, so that my team might rush a little early, might not. It all depends on who the enemy ends up attacking and if they end up dying or not, how much damage is taken, and so on. For Donnie, I kind of like just a stun gun for him. You know, I don't need to get fancy. AP down when attacking would not be an ideal weapon for him because, again, you want the opponent to rush you. If you end up dying from them rushing you, that to me is a win because you're not giving away all these bonus points. In Platinum, it's 7,500 points. In Diamond, it's 10,000 points. So it's just a huge amount of points, especially with the multiplier. Mercer, I have him kind of designed for Horde, if that ever comes back. So right now, I still don't like him on this defensive team. Charlie has a very offensive weapon, but he has HP and defensive mods. So he's well balanced, and I think he could do fairly well here. Rosita, the goal for her is to have her die early, because then my team will gain AP and be able to rush and cause the opponent to have to make a decision to rush or control me somehow, unless they have Leopo, and then I would probably need maim resist mods on my team, since exhaust is maim damage. So if you create an AP team for defense, consider reflect damage mods as well as maim resist mods, because that way basic attacks will be reflected back onto the user, and if someone uses an exhaust tune, then you might be able to avoid the maim damage. Eris here might be a decent tune to use, just because she's tanky like Joshua, can stun the enemy, and taunt. Now, what I'm kind of thinking about when on offense is I need a disarm tune in order to break unfriendly weapons, because if someone has a team with all stun guns or absolute defense weapons, that can be very difficult. Again, I mentioned why I liked Camilla, but I could use someone like Mirabelle, for instance, the green one from the season store before. I'm going to stick with Marlin and Rosie, who is an honor roll tune, so they can use basic attacks, and every turn they're gaining plus 20 attack, which is very effective if you don't want to be rushing, because you're getting that buff every turn anyway. Now, because it is attack, you can use someone like Magna with an impair weapon because you want to control the enemy. Turley can be a decent tune because he attacks pretty hard with basic attacks, but also has some control with his taunt, and his active skill 100% heal reduction is like a mini decap. Now, I'm not saying this is my defensive team, but I'm just going to kind of evaluate some mods and kind of explain my thinking for them. So if I have Eric on defense, the green trait resist is so that Ambers hopefully won't be able to kill Eric as fast. The Graze is here because he's my reviver, and he has a pretty decent active skill as well. Bleed resist as well as maim resist, just because bleed is a set amount of damage and so is maim. With my next tune, when we take a look, I'm not exactly happy with his mod choice because I run him on normal attack teams. So this AP drain mod is actually counterproductive because the opponent might want us to AP drain them. So it isn't exactly a smart mod choice there. Again, a reflect damage mod, a graze mod would be decent. Even defense when confused at this point. Bleed mod, burn mod, just something other than AP drain. I wouldn't use this attack up when taunted mod on him just because I have a taunt resist mod, so there's no chance of the secondary mod to go off if I do resist taunt in the end. On Joshua, I kind of tried to make him tanky, gave him an impair resist because if he rushes, then people's basic attacks are only 40% of what they were before, because he does minus 60% attack to all enemies. A maim resist is important because he has a set amount of HP, so if he's able to resist maim damage that's applied to him, that just prevents him from dying as fast. I wish I had a tune that could recover all penalties like Mackenzie, for instance. I think she would fit in well on a defensive team, also being a retribution tune. Douglas here, crit chance mod, so he goes off more often, but that AP drain mod is just not a good choice to have here. I do like that Douglas can taunt, confuse, heal, and he's a Guardian 2 tune, so he provides some coverage for my team. And as mentioned before with Guardian tunes, with it being able to block some attacks, it almost forces the enemy to take him out early, because if you're able to force it to be 1v1 at the end and your tune just keeps shielding themselves every time, then you're going to time them out, or they're just going to be so frustrated that they end up rushing if they have a double attack rush or something, for instance. Now, I know that a lot of people have different strategies when attacking and when defending. I just feel like because Onslaught is a lot more similar to Raid than it is to War, that you need to consider your type of mod choice for both offense and defense based on the type of team that you're running. Because unlike Raid, in Onslaught, you actually want the opponent to rush when they beat you. But it's about finding that balance. For defense, you need to have a team that can rush fast, in my opinion, has reflect damage mods so that those basic attacks can be thrown back at the opponent. And you need to be able to control the offense. You don't want to end up impairing them, so confusing them, taunting them, stunning them, burning them, bleeding them, maiming them to death. You just have a lot of different options that way. And on attack, if you think or if you know someone is running an impair weapon on defense, like on a Magna, an impair weapon when being attacked, then you should use attack up when impaired mods in order to increase your basic attacks. Punish the enemy for using a certain mod set. In my opinion, Onslaught is a lot about strategy and identifying what your weaknesses are. So on defense, if I'm going to run a team that is a fast AP gaining team, I know that someone might end up using an exhaust team, which will apply maim damage to my team. So I would have to use maim resist mods in order to mitigate the effects of that. Having a reflect damage mod will reflect basic attacks that people are trying to use. So if there's any rushes that I have that can encourage the enemy to end up rushing me because they have no choice, then that to me is a win. Feel free to share with me some of your strategies for Onslaught, and if you have any other suggestions on what you can do for Onslaught in order to make your defense better or your offense better, feel free to share in the comment section below. Thanks again for watching and listening to my video.